Have you just handed victory to President Putin on a plate?
After 100,000 casualties and the fact that Ukraine will remain an independent nation, that's as asinine a statement, as absolutely absurd and really irresponsible as we heard from The Economist just hours before the phone call saying that Kiev is being iced out of the discussions about the future of that region, as President Trump was literally about to call the president of the Ukraine. So sadly, fake news is not just a phenomena.
What's up, everybody? Jackson here, and this is a genuinely tense one. Sebastian Gorka from the Trump administration going head-to-head with the BBC's Victoria Derbyshire over the direction of the Ukraine negotiations. She presses him on a comment from a senior UK defense figure calling the administration's approach a betrayal, and Gorka's answer basically boils down to "that's fake news," before pivoting to blaming previous administrations. Where this really escalates is when Derbyshire raises the deaths of civilians, including women killed in a maternity hospital, and Gorka ends the interview rather than responding. I want to break down what actually got asked, what got answered, and what didn't. Because there's a real substantive question buried in here about what stopping the bloodshed actually means if it comes. With territorial concessions? Stick with me, get that like in, get subscribed, because we go through the tape and not just the reaction. Now let's get into it.
We stand with any nation that wishes to implement its sovereignty and which shares our values. And we know that those amongst our civilization that share our values understand, and we stand next to them shoulder to shoulder.
But not the women killed in the maternity hospital in southern Ukraine.
Is that a serious statement? I mean, do you really have
May
no
I finish
shame?
my sentence now,
No
please?
shame.
Let's go live to the White House to talk to Seb Gorka, who is the Senior Director for Counterterrorism for Trump's administration. Thank you very much for talking to the UK, Sebastian Gorka. I don't know if you just heard what a senior figure in the UK defence community has said about the Trump administration and its plan. The bastards are doing it.
Well, I hope that's fake news or not from somebody who actually cares about the special relationship between our two countries. So we had Crimea taken under the Obama administration. Not sure the government or Whitehall called the Obama administration bastards back then. Then for 4 years, we had peace under my boss in the first Trump administration. And then in comes the Biden administration and another invasion of Ukraine. Not sure the MOD was complaining about the last administration. So either, and I dearly hope it's fake news, or that person doesn't have any influence inside the MOD in the UK.
Have you just handed victory to President Putin on a plate?
After 100,000 casualties and the fact that Ukraine will remain an independent nation, that's as asinine a statement, as absolutely absurd and really irresponsible as we heard from The Economist just hours before the phone call saying that Kiev is being iced out of the discussions about the future of that region, as President Trump was literally about to call the president of the Ukraine. So sadly, fake news is not just a phenomena on our side of the Atlantic, but clearly amongst your colleagues in the press in the UK.
President Putin invaded a country, he took a load of land, he killed tens of thousands of Ukrainians, and now it appears the US is saying to him, yeah, you can keep the land that you've taken and stolen from your neighbour.
I like the fact that you think you know what the US is promising to anyone. We've been very clear on the campaign trail. President Trump and his team has been adamant since we came into this building 3 weeks ago that the #1 priority is to stop the bloodshed. And you don't have to tell me, the son of those who literally escaped a communist regime, what the reality of the Russian Federation is today. So please stick to the facts. President Trump.
Absolutely, I absolutely accept that on the campaign trail.
Let me finish my sentence.
On the campaign trail, President Trump said he wanted to stop the war. He wanted to pull the US out. Today,
will you let me finish my sentence?
Go ahead.
Will you let me? Whether it's the Middle East, whether it's Gaza, whether it is the European continent, remember, this isn't in our hemisphere, this is in your hemisphere. This is in the Eurasian continent, or whether it is Ukraine, whether the Middle East or anywhere, the number one priority of the commander-in-chief is to stop the bloodshed, not to pander to establishment, left-wing, Ramona talking points. That's not why we're here.
If I may ask a question now, Mr. Gorka, and what he did not say on that campaign trail, but which your Defence Secretary did say today, is that it was unrealistic for Ukraine to want to go back to its pre-2014 borders. That is saying to President Putin, you can keep the land you took by force.
Well, geopolitics and politics is the art of the possible. So my question to you would be, what are you proposing? Is the British army going to deploy to the Donbass or to Crimea? President Trump wants the bloodshed to end, not to live in some cloud cuckoo land of that which is impossible. So the fact is, the fighting will cease because of President Trump, not thanks to the failure of Biden or Obama. And that is the beginning point for Europeans to try and sort out the situation on their continent. President Trump has been explicit. America first is not America alone. So the question is, what are our allies inside NATO going to do to secure the future of that landmass?
But in terms
does Uncle Sam have to fix everything for you?
In terms of the negotiations, it's clear there will be no US troops. It appears that US is pulling back support. Where is the US's leverage when it comes to these negotiations?
The most powerful nation in the world, with a president who has won a popular mandate of 77 million votes, with 12 nuclear aircraft carriers. There is no nation in the world that has greater leverage than the United States and the current incumbent president. So where's the leverage? Everywhere.
And if you share a border with Russia and maybe you're not a member of NATO, how worried should you be if you live in Georgia, for example?
Well, having very close ties to the region, with my parents having escaped Hungary, I am incredibly impressed with the nations that do border the Ukraine, who are the easterly members of NATO. I had very, very good meetings with one of the Baltic nations' representatives here just last week. So we're very impressed with how those who have suffered under the jackboot of a communist regime in the Soviet Union, like our Baltic brethren, like Hungary, like Poland, understand the dire threat that is posed by proto-imperial forces on their easterly borders. So we here in the White House hope that those NATO nations will lead the way to show others amongst our allied forces how seriously they should take their own security as part of a shared alliance.
And finally, your message, or what message does it send out to any other leader, for example, President Xi of China, who might fancy invading another country, for example, Taiwan?
Oh, I think the president has been explicit. This administration is predicated on freedom, on prosperity, and above all else, national sovereignty. That's why we were so excited with the British people voting to leave the European Union and Brexit, to reassert their national sovereignty. So if you believe
what about Ukraine's national sovereignty?
If you believe in the national sovereignty of your nation, we will support you. And seriously, look at what support we have given the Ukrainians in the last 3 years.
It's huge.
I don't
it's
think
huge.
I don't think any, again, you're interrupting me, and it's really not done. At the end of the day, we stand with any nation that wishes to implement its sovereignty and which shares our values. And we know that those amongst our civilization that share our values understand, and we stand next to them shoulder to shoulder.
But not the women killed in the maternity hospital in southern Ukraine.
Is that a serious statement? I mean, do you really have no shame?
May I finish my sentence now,
No
please?
shame. You have no
Not
shame.
the
That is
women killed.
beneath the BBC.
The women
As someone
killed
who
in the
grew up
maternity
on the
hospital.
products of the BBC, that is
The families
absolutely
killed
shameful.
in their own apartments
Shameful.
in the capital.
You should be ashamed of yourself
The
making such a
people
statement.
eating in a
I am
pizza
not
place.
even going to countenance replying to such an absolutely abhorrent statement.
Thank you very much for your time, Sebastian Gorka,
You're
live
welcome.
from the White House.
Let's get into the actual substance here, because underneath the tension, there's a real policy question worth sitting with honestly. Derbyshire's core challenge was straightforward. If the plan is to end the war by allowing Russia to keep territory it seized by force, doesn't that functionally reward the invasion rather than resolve it? Gorka's answer was to reframe the goal as stopping the bloodshed as quickly as possible, arguing that insisting on a full return to pre-2014 borders is unrealistic given the situation on the ground. Those are two different value systems in tension with each other, not really a factual dispute. One prioritizes an immediate end to casualties, the other prioritizes not setting a precedent that territorial conquest by force gets normalized. Reasonable people land in different places on which priority should win out, and that's a legitimate foreign policy debate that shows up in basically every negotiated end to a war throughout history. Not something unique to this administration. Where Gorka's answer was weaker was on the leverage question. Derbyshire asked directly what leverage the US actually retains in these negotiations if military support is being pulled back, and Gorka's answer, essentially everywhere, without specifics, didn't really engage with the substance of the question. If you're going to claim a position of strength in a negotiation, naming the actual leverage matters, and that's a fair thing to press on, regardless of which administration is being asked. The moment that shut the interview down was Derbyshire raising the deaths of Ukrainian civilians, including in a strike on a maternity hospital, as a direct challenge to the shoulder to shoulder with nations who share our values framing Gorka had just used. Gorka's response was to call the framing of a question shameful and end the interview rather than address it. I'd note two things fairly here. Ending an interview rather than engaging with a hard question is a legitimate thing to criticize, regardless of who's doing it. But it's also true that how a question is phrased can genuinely feel like it's implying the answerer personally doesn't care about civilian deaths, which is a serious accusation to level at someone in real time. Both of those things can be true, and the quit doesn't fully resolve which one primarily drove the walkout. Here's the through line worth taking from this, regardless of your politics. When a spokesperson responds to a hard question by ending the interview instead of answering it, that's worth noting as a pattern. But so is the broader habit across cable and network news of turning substantive foreign policy questions into gotcha moments rather than getting a real answer on the record. Both things happen constantly on every side of these debates. So tell me, do you think ending an interview is ever a legitimate response to a hostile question? Or is it always a sign the person doesn't have an answer? Let me know in the comments. And if you want more of these full breakdowns instead of just quick reactions, get subscribed, and I'll see you in the next one.